Top of the hour here on Coffee and Cream in the Morning on Hail Varsity Radio, powered by Currency, alongside Robbie Lula, Andrew Rogers, live from the H&H Chevrolet stage at Hail Varsity Club. Happy to have you with us, and happy to be joined by Sam McKewon, as he normally shoots with us at the 8 o'clock segment of the Monday morning show at SW McKewon, OWH, the sports editor at the Omaha World Herald. Sam, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Hey, good, man. Good. Big Chicago guy. I know you're a big Bears fan. Are you a Bulls fan?
I'm not.
Okay.
But I follow. I follow the Bulls. No, my NBA teams, and this is 35 years now. Well, longer than that actually. Are Golden State and Portland. Those are the two teams that I've followed since I was a kid.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because I just started watching The Last Dance for the first time, if you can believe it, and I didn't know if you were a big Last Dance fan.
Yes, I'm a big fan of that. So yeah, that's a terrific documentary. It's right up there with the best work that ESPN's ever done. So that and the OJ doc are probably the two best ESPN docs they've ever done. And yeah, I mean, Michael Jordan was loomed very large in all of our childhood. And those teams too. I mean, I could tell you everybody on those teams because everybody watched the NBA back then. Mm-hmm. We don't now, but everybody did. It's true. I mean, I couldn't. It's much harder to tell you. You wouldn't find necessarily a ton of kids today who could tell you every player on the Denver team that just won the NBA title. And you used to be able to do that with the Bulls. I mean, you knew it was Jordan and Rodman and Pippen, and the Rodman came later. But Bill Cartwright and Harvey Grant and Horace Grant, all those guys. And so, I read the Jordan rules when I was in, I think college. And then, so The Last Dance is terrific. I think I went through it about 1.5 times. I don't know if I'll ever finish it a second time.
Well, Sam, I'm on time 4 because I'm rewatching it with Andrew here. I'm curious, as somebody who grew up through the Jordan era and that Bulls era, I'm curious how you digested The Last Dance in terms of how much of it were you aware of, how much of it was kind of a reminder, and how much of it was, oh, this is totally new information to me. That's really interesting.
There was new information because I think, it's predicated in part on the back end of his career. Mm-hmm. I think the 98 season. Mm-hmm. And by then I was in college and probably not paying quite as close attention. There's kind of a sweet spot in your youth where you're paying a lot of attention around 10 years old all the way up until maybe you're out of high school. And then you lose a little touch there in college, and then maybe you come back to it as an adult. So there was some new information because a lot of it was built on that final championship season. But I mean, a lot of it I knew. If you read the Jordan rules, a good chunk of it already. And of course, everybody had followed Michael Jordan's career. I think there's obviously reflections within the documentary that are specific to his recollections when he gave the interviews. And so I think, there's a certain power to that. And he certainly represents an era that we no longer exist in for an athlete. There's just no question that, and there's things that are really appealing about Jordan's worldview, and then there's things that are just an anachronism to today. So it's interesting that way. That's just the best way to put it. There's such a gap between who Michael Jordan is and who, say, Steph Curry is. And I've watched thousands of Steph Curry games at this point. Probably not thousands, but hundreds and hundreds.
Yeah.
And just who he is and who Jordan is, and there's similarities to the two of them. They both like golf, all those things like that. But there's also huge differences. And if you're going to ask me, well, who is the personality shaping person of the basketball today and in the future, I would not say it's LeBron. I would say it's Steph. Mm-hmm. Kobe in the first part of LeBron's era, and then Steph in this part of the era. LeBron is somehow going to, I think, remain sort of beyond in some ways. So everybody will acknowledge that he was the best player of all time without necessarily, desiring to emulate him or desiring to, put him in that, and there's a lot of similarities between Kobe and Jordan, but very, very few between Kobe and Steph. So I think the nature of the sport has changed, and I'm not sure where it's going to go from here. If they don't find somebody else to build the sport around, it could be in a little bit of trouble, because you certainly don't want, I know we've gone off on a tangent here, you as good of a player as some of the guys are today, you don't necessarily want to build it around some of the guys that are playing today. Like Steph Curry he's still the guy, and as long as he's in the league, he's going to be the biggest star. He and LeBron.
Sam, let's change gears now and talk football, because there was some recruiting news yesterday that we'll get into, but I want to start with this kind of just more of a general question here. With the way Nebraska has recruited this summer, it seems like they're ahead of the curve when looking ahead toward the future. Do you think it will still take the Matt Rhule 3 years to see dividends with this team?
Yes, I do. I don't think if you're recruiting a bunch of 5 stars, maybe you could jumpstart that a little bit, but a lot of the guys are recruiting are probably not going to play in 2024. So I think it's going to be a developmental program. Here's the thing. I think there's a feeling within it that you're going to have an experienced offensive line here in 2023. You hope that's also true in 2024. There's other things that you need to build up. I think they know that. They've got to build a wide receiver core that has genuine chemistry and also is sort of a grassroots, and not just a guy that you're bringing in from some other school, but somebody who's lived in your playbook for 2 to 3 years and really knows it and really knows how to play the game, and knows how to play the game under the tutelage of the coaches that they have. I think that's also true at the running back position. They just haven't been elite there. Minnesota's been elite there. I think Wisconsin's been really, really good there. Nebraska's not. Illinois had a really good one last year, Chase Brown. They just haven't been good enough at that position. I think they've been very good at tight end, but obviously they're starting over there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, you've got to find a way to build that front seven. So I think the sense is, hey, let's get all these young guys in here now. Let's begin that process this year. I think they can still win 5 or 6 this year. But next year, maybe you can win 6 or 7. I don't know. But you're starting to bring around some of those young players. And I think in 2025 and 2026 is when, you begin to have the kind of roster where everybody kind of looks around and says, yeah, maybe there's a shot here. The schedule this year isn't tough, super tough. So maybe they can get over the top and get the 6 or 7 wins. I don't know that the roster's there, but there may be enough close games where the coaching kicks in and they're able to pull off something nice.
Sam, I'm curious how much you think the lack of running back success at Nebraska, how much is that to do with the guys that they actually have in the room, and how much of it do you think has to do with the fact that the offensive line has been kind of lackluster in recent years? I mean, those two things obviously work pretty hand in hand, but do you assign some of that blame to the line and not to the actual running back room?
Oh, some. Not like Nebraska was running for 100 yards per game before last year.
Mm-hmm.
They were still running the ball for pretty good chunky yards. I would say that the running backs themselves obviously bear some of the responsibility of that. Anthony Grant was good at times last year. I think toward the end of the year he got a little. He could have had 1,000 yards if he had kept going, and he had an outside chance at that going into the final game. But at the end of the day, didn't get a ton of blocking. And the other thing is Anthony Grant just didn't. He didn't consistently gain yards at the line of scrimmage. If he could get to the second level, he was dangerous, but too often it took him too long to get there. So I think there's something to be said for the quality of the player, and I think they haven't had. You can go back and watch some of the runs that Amir Abdullah had in 2014, and It weren't because of the offensive line. I mean, it just made plays. And I think that they haven't had a good running back since then. You know, Terrell Newby was decent. Divino Zigbo was pretty good that one year. And I just think it's been a little downhill since then. I don't think they've found the guy, so to speak. And I don't know if the guy's on the team right now. I think they're still looking. Quentin Ives may be that guy, but I'd be surprised if Quentin Ives was playing this year. I think he'll probably break through.
We're talking to Sam McKewon, sports editor at the Omaha World Herald. Sam, you considered the commitment of Preston Taumua the biggest recruiting win for the Huskers in the 24 cycle. Is it because it's reopening the Hawaiian pipeline? Is it because of his other offers on the West Coast? Why do you consider this the biggest recruiting win?
Well, by saying that, I'm not saying he's the highest rated player in the class. That's Carter Nelson. I'm not saying that he has the highest ceiling of anybody in the class. That's Danny Kaelin. But I'm saying that, like, this is the commit that you would have, along with Ja'Cory Barney, that you would have said was the least likely. And so, in that way, it's a surprising and impressive win. Now, a lot of the guys that Nebraska has received commits from, Nebraska was either clearly their best offer, or Nebraska was in a small group of teams and just happened to win. Gibson Pyle would be an example there. But, Callan Barta and Rex Guthrie, Nebraska was clearly their best offer. They weren't going somewhere else because Nebraska was their best offer by a long shot. Donovan Jones fits into that category. Now, if they're able to get Grant Bricks, then I think it goes even up another notch, because I think Grant Bricks could have gone to a lot of schools, including Oklahoma. And so, we'll see. Nebraska doesn't usually beat Oklahoma in recruiting. If we're going to be really honest, they just they don't pull it off. It doesn't happen very much. I remember they went through a huge recruiting battle for Jalen Redmond back in the day, and they didn't win that one. Oklahoma won that battle. There's been kids in Wichita that Nebraska went after, and they didn't win it. There's been kids in St. Louis, and it was Nebraska and Oklahoma, and they didn't win it. A couple of kids that Nebraska got from the state of Oklahoma didn't offer. So, they've had a hard time beating that team. Now, in the case of Taumua, they beat Oregon, and they legitimately beat Oregon. That was, and Oregon is a recruiting juggernaut. So, beat Oregon, which offers a lot of NIL money. Be able to do that, pretty impressive. And they did it. And so I think you got to win some of those. Even if the kid doesn't pan out, you've got to be able to go toe-to-toe with the teams that are peddling a lot of money. That's the wrong word, but offering a lot of money and are really strong in recruiting. You got to go beat those teams sometimes. You got to have some of the other guys too. You got to have the Callan Bart and the Rex Guthrie and Braylon Prude. You got to have those guys too. You got to go and win some. You got to go win. You got to go win a recruiting battle where the kid is wanted by 10 teams, and they're all really good. And they've done that twice here in the last 10 days with Ja'Cory Barney and then the offensive lineman from Hawaii.
Sam, you said something that caught my attention there about Daniel Kaelin. You think he's the guy that has the highest ceiling in the class. What leads you to make a statement like that? And I guess if you're comfortable, what do you think that ceiling is?
Well, he's a quarterback, and so anytime you have an opportunity to get a quarterback and then that player maximizes their potential, they have a chance to affect your team in a greater way than almost anybody on the field.
Sure.
And I understand that they have to have offensive linemen that block for him, but yeah, like, his ceiling is really high. I think that the question mark about Danny really had nothing to do with his ability to play the position, but maybe arm strength and had he done it and things like that. I don't think Danny Kaelin has the strongest arm in the world, but I think it's more than adequate for what I think it's Kenny Pickett strong, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I think Danny can be an NFL quarterback, and I think he can be, I don't know if a first round pick, but I think he can be a day 2 or a high day 3 pick. And to be clear, Nebraska's really never had that since Vince Ferragamo.
Yeah.
That's the last time. Turner Gill was taken. Keith McCant was taken. Eric Crouch was taken, but he was taken as a wing back or whatever they were trying to recruit, sign him as with the Rams. I think Kaelin can be a legit, NFL quarterback. So that's a high ceiling. There aren't a lot of those. I think he has that ability. There's things he does now that a lot of other kids don't do when you watch his film. Little things about how he climbs the pocket, manipulates it, that I think will translate well to this level. And then it just becomes, if he's able to physically mature, building an offense that takes advantage of his skill set. And the trick with that is that, there's a lot of coaches, and I'm not saying that Matt Rhule is in this group, who are just in love with arm strength.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when they build an offense, Let's build an offense around needing a quarterback who throws the ball as far as Josh Allen. And that's really not what you need. It helps, sure. But what you need is an offense that depends on rhythm and timing and moving the chains and getting deeper and deeper into a defensive pitch count, so to speak. And I think if you want to build an offense like that around Kaelin, I think you're gonna like what you see. But we'll just have to see over time what Nebraska intends to do offensively and where it goes.
Sam, overreaction or nugget of truth? Because I've been following along with Nebraska's top 10% list that they keep putting out on their pages the last 6 or so. It surprises you Quinton Newsome hasn't been featured on one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Overreaction or nugget of truth?
I mean,
because I don't know if we just follow along with those lists because they're out there, if that's actually what's taking place behind closed doors.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a nugget of truth to it. But I can't speak to it. I think that's,
But does it surprise you that you haven't seen his name pop up? Because we've been talking about him being, maybe the biggest impact player on that defense over the last month.
Maybe. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what, maybe what his off-season protocol is versus what some of the other guys are doing. I'm not, again, I'm not entirely sure what track he's on versus what track they're on. It could be some small detail that keeps him off of that is not terribly impactful to his play on the field. There may be something that he's working through as a player, working through an injury or working through some shift in his technique, any number of things that could come up. I think that it's an interesting, I'm sure Matt Rhule has thought about, because he thinks about these things. I'm sure he's thought about what it looks like to a fan base to put that thing out there all the time and not see one of your best players on it. And so that'll have to be a question that he's able to address and answer. I don't know that they publish this information at Temple or Baylor. I don't know I don't think they did. They may find that after a summer of doing that, that they don't want to do that again. I know that Scott Frost got into, let's publish all the testing results. And I'm just telling you that we're in the social media thing, we're just in a different world now. And so, I don't know if that's going to be something that they want to do, all the time going forward. Publishing the 10%. Initially, when they put it out, they just put the 10, and nobody knew what it meant. I knew what it meant because I've been, and we're working on stories that will later bear itself out. I've been working on a bunch of Rhule culture stories, so I knew what it meant, and I kind of explained what it was. But it's a thing that they like to do. They got a lot of these. They got a lot of little competitions, and you remember in the spring they did those posting where they were and all that
right
on Twitter.
Right.
They got a lot of little competitions like that. I don't know if they'll last through 3 years of the program or not. It's once I think you establish the culture of the Thunder, I don't know that you need to do all that, but I think they feel like they wanted to post it on social media so that the players got an understanding, maybe a little serotonin bump of how they were doing. So it's interesting to me. The fact that you asked that question reinforces to me that it's a topic. To be clear, there's about 4% of the universe on Twitter. So most fans don't know, they don't care. It's just not something that's necessarily going to be front of mind for most people who aren't on Twitter, because I don't think maybe they're posting it to Instagram. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either.
I think it's more of a message to the players than the fan base at large, and maybe that's a message that they feel like Newsom needs to receive.
That's an interesting point there, Sam. As you're working on stuff as the season approaches, as you're kind of doing your, I'm sure it's not last preparations quite yet, but as you're kind of getting into the swing of football prep, and as we're 5.5 weeks away from the first game, has there been anything that jumps out to you that you're thinking about, that you're, a player, a concept, a culture thing, like these 10% lists? Is there something that's been on your mind as you're starting to get a little bit deeper into the Nebraska football preparation for the fall?
Yeah, I think one of certainly the two things that kind of jump out to me, the culture thing is ongoing, and so it informs success. But the closer you get to the season, I think you start to have more specific questions. So a question that I always go into any given season with is, can the offense, any offense, this offense, turn around, hand the ball to the running back, and have a successful running game without having to run the quarterback? And if not, how often do they need to run the quarterback? Because there's a threshold. You get up around 10, 11 carries a game, and you might as well just expect about 12 fumbles a year. 12 possessions that are basically like a jump ball in the air, right? Only a super important jump ball, because possessions in football are way more important than possessions in basketball. So, you're going to have 12 possessions a year that you might lose or gain. You never know, by running your quarterback 10 or 11 times. So there's that. Can they run the ball without having to do that? And if so, it kind of sets up some other things for you. And then on the defensive side of the ball, I'm just interested to see how it's going to look. How does that defense fare when a team comes out and says, okay, we see that you're running this defense and it's smaller and faster and quicker. We're just going to put 2 tight ends on the field. We're going to line up and we're just going to run it all night. And we're going to find out, and you're going to do your little twists and your stunts and your blitzes. And we're going to watch those, and we're going to adjust to those. And as the game goes on, we're going to seal off your edges, and we're just going to run the football at you. And we're going to see if you can stop it with your 3-3-5. That's the other thing. Can Nebraska stop teams with that defense in the Big Ten? When Michigan, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, Minnesota, when they all hammer it at you, can you slow it down? That'll be the question. That'll be the other question that I'm thinking about.
Sam, always great stuff. We appreciate your time, as always, on Monday, and have a great day. That's Sam McKewon, sports editor at the Omaha World Herald, at SW McKewon, OWH on Twitter. When we come back, we'll revisit conversations that we left off with to close out the 7 o'clock hour. Talks about Scottie Pippen. That's next.